My parents said they wouldn't pay for my life-saving medical treatment because they needed the money for my sister's education. Luckily my uncle saved me. But I secretly did this, and they came to regret their choice for years to come. I was 15 when I found out my life wasn't worth the price of a college degree. I still remember the way my dad sat across from me at the kitchen table, his hands folded like we were discussing what to have for dinner, not whether I was going to live or die. My mom stood behind him with her arms crossed, silent like usual. They had just gotten off the phone with the insurance company. I knew the treatment wasn't covered. I knew it was going to be expensive. But I also thought I knew, that they had savings. Not a ton but enough. They'd mentioned it more than once. So I asked, what now? My dad looked at me with that weirdly calm face he always made when he was about to say something awful. We're not going to move forward with the treatment. At first I didn't understand. I thought maybe he meant they wanted a second opinion or were waiting for more information. I was confused, not scared yet. What do you mean? I asked. He let out a soft sigh like I was making this harder than it needed to be. Sweetie, we've talked about it. Your mother and I think if it's meant to be, God will make it work out. I blinked. What? Mom finally spoke. We can't afford to spend everything on this. Callie's starting university next year. Her future, her tuition, her housing, that's all lined up. We can't throw that away. Throw that away. I stared at them. I couldn't even breathe for a second. I wasn't naive. I knew they always favored Callie. She was the golden girl. She got new clothes, summer camps, tutoring attention. I got leftovers and silence. But I never actually believed they'd let me die. You're choosing college over me? My voice came out small. My dad looked almost offended. Don't say it like that. It's not a choice. We're just trusting in God's plan. I sat there, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear. I wanted to scream. Or cry. Or throw something. But I didn't. Instead I stood up, went to my room and closed the door. I didn't come out for the rest of the night. They didn't knock. That was the moment it hit me. If I wanted to live, I was gonna have to do it alone. So I opened my laptop. I started Googling. Can a minor disown their parents for medical neglect? Can I get free health care if I'm in foster care? Does juvenile detention include medical treatment? I'm not kidding. For a few minutes, I honestly considered committing a crime just bad enough to get me arrested, but not so bad I'd be locked away forever. I figured jail had to have some kind of medical care, right? Sounds ridiculous now. But at the time I was desperate. I found out I could file for emancipation, but it usually required parental consent or a judge's ruling, which would take time I didn't have. There were shelters, but they were full or too far. And I didn't want to go to some stranger. Then I thought of Rudy, my dad's older brother. He lived about 40 minutes away. We didn't see him often. My parents used to talk about him like he was some sad little failure. Said he lived in a shoebox apartment and worked part-time tutoring kids who barely passed. They laughed at him for never getting married, for throwing his money away on stray animals and take-out food. But I remembered him being kind. Every time we did see him, he made a point to talk to me. Not just hello or you talk, but real talk. He looked at me like he actually saw me. Like he cared. So I didn't reach out. Not yet. I wasn't ready to ask for help. I just wanted to survive the night. I packed a bag, some clothes, my ID, a charger. I took the little bit of cash I had hidden in a jar in my closet, maybe $70 total. I waited until after midnight, listened to the creak of the hallway floorboards, the click of their bedroom door, and then I left. Just like that. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I walked 5 blocks before I found a bench near the 24-hour grocery store. I sat there for a long time just thinking. I thought about how I used to believe my parents loved me. Not the way they loved Callie. Sure. But I thought maybe deep down they still cared. I thought about the way my dad had held my hand when I was little, how he used to read to me at night. Before Callie started middle school and everything shifted. I thought about my mom teaching her how to drive while I sat inside doing dishes. And I thought about how now that I needed them most, they'd chosen to spend that money on someone else, not a stranger. Not a neighbor. My sister. And not just for anything. For college. As if that somehow mattered more than whether I lived to see 16. I sat on that bench until the sky started to lighten. I didn't cry. I just planned. But as I wasn't going back. Whatever happened next, whatever I had to do, wherever I had to go, I was going to find a way to stay alive. Without them, I didn't sleep that first night. I watched the sky change from black to gray, then to gold as the sun came up. People passed me on the sidewalk. Some with coffee cups, some walking dogs, a few in suits with their heads down. No one looked at me. I think that's what hit me hardest. How invisible I was. Just a boy on a bench with a backpack. No one stopped to ask if I was okay. Not that I expected them to. I was used to not being seen. I'd gotten good at it. Not in a sad, melodramatic way, just in a quiet, practiced way. I knew how to disappear in plain sight. How to take up as little space as possible. That's what it had been like at home for as long as I could remember. My parents weren't abusive in the way people expect. They didn't yell or hit or lock me in a closet. They didn't need to. Ignoring someone completely is its own kind of violence. Callie, my older sister, was the star. The day she was born, I think the spotlight just permanently snapped toward her. And when I came along 2 years later, I was an afterthought. They'd never say that out loud, of course. They'd smile and say they loved us equally, but it was a lie so thin you could see through it with your eyes closed. When Callie got sick, it was a family emergency. Everyone dropped what they were doing. When I got sick, I was told to drink some tea and rest. When she won a science fair, my parents threw a party. When I placed second in a writing competition, my dad said, "That's nice, buddy. Can you set the table now?" It wasn't just big moments either. It was the small, constant choices. Callie got new shoes every semester. Nike's always name brand. I wore the same pair for 2 years until they split at the heel. She got a laptop for school when she turned 13. I got a hand-me-down that barely turned on. She got driving lessons. I got told we'd figure it out later. And I believed it would come later. That eventually it would be my turn. That if I just worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, proved myself enough, they'd see me. I spent years trying to earn their attention like it was a scholarship. One time in 7th grade, I got a perfect report card straight as I showed it to my mom, proud for once hopeful. She glanced at it and said, "That's expected of you. Callie struggles more, so her achievements mean more." I felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. I didn't show her my grades after that. Even birthdays were different. Callie always got a party. Balloons, gifts, a fancy cake with her name written in pink icing. My 15th birthday? My dad forgot. I only got a text that said, "Oh, happy birthday. Sorry, busy day at work." I remember reading it while sitting alone at the bus stop after school. I bought myself a cupcake from the cafeteria and ate it while waiting for the ride home. I wasn't angry, not exactly. Just numb. But even with all of that, I never thought they'd let me die. That's the part that still doesn't feel real sometimes. I thought they loved me even if it wasn't the same way they loved Callie. I thought if it came down to it, if my life was on the line, they'd step up. They didn't. They chose her. But this time it wasn't over a pair of shoes or a school trip or a birthday. It was my life. And they walked away from it like it was nothing. I tried to tell myself they were scared. That maybe they didn't understand the diagnosis or they were overwhelmed. But I'd seen their faces. Calm. Steady. Resigned. They had known what they were doing. That's what sent me running. Not just fear but clarity. I wasn't safe in that house. Not because they'd hurt me, but because they wouldn't save me. So I ran. And now I was sitting on a park bench with a backpack full of clothes and $73 in cash. I didn't know where I was going yet. I just knew I wasn't going back. For a second I thought about calling my school counselor. But I knew how that would go. Mandatory reports. Child services. Maybe foster care. Maybe worse. I'd seen enough news stories to know that even well-meaning systems don't always protect kids. Then I thought about Rudy. My dad's brother. The only adult in my life who ever treated me like I mattered. I hadn't seen him in almost a year. My parents didn't like inviting him over. Said he was negative and always judging. In reality, I think he just made them uncomfortable. But as he saw through them, he never bought into the perfect family act. Once when I was maybe 10, I overheard my dad on the phone with Rudy. They were arguing. My dad said, "We're doing fine, Rudy. You don't need to lecture us on parenting." Rudy's voice came through the speaker sharp and clear. "I'm not lecturing. I'm just wondering why Elliot looks like he hasn't been hugged in weeks." That sentence hit me like a truck. Guess it was true. He saw me. Even then. And now, sitting on a park bench with the morning sun warming my back and nothing but fear in my chest, I realized something. He was the only person in the world I trusted. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe he'd let me crash on his couch for a night or two. Maybe he'd help me figure out how to talk to someone, find a social worker, apply for help. I didn't expect anything more than that because Rudy was poor. My parents never stopped reminding me of that. "He can barely take care of himself," my mom would mutter. "Lives like a hermit," my dad added. "You should feel lucky we provide what he can't." I didn't believe them, not really. But their words echoed in my head now as I pulled my phone from my pocket and stared at his number. My hands shook as I dialed. The phone rang once. Twice. Then he picked up. "Hello." I opened my mouth and for the first time since leaving home, I felt tears burning at the edges of my eyes. "Rudy," I said. "It's me. Elliot." I waited for him to ask what was wrong. To sound confused. He didn't. He just said, "Where are you?" And when I told him, he said 2 words I'll never forget. "Stay there. I'm coming." He pulled up 10 minutes later in a faded red car with one window that wouldn't roll up all the way. The moment I saw him, I nearly lost it. My legs felt numb like I'd forgotten how to stand. I grabbed my bag and moved toward the car before he could even park properly. He got out, eyes scanning me head to toe like he was checking if I was real. I didn't know what to expect. Shock questions, maybe even a lecture. But he didn't say anything. Just opened his arms and I walked into them like I'd been waiting my whole life to be held. He didn't ask why I was there. Didn't ask what happened. He just said, "Let's get you warm." We drove in silence most of the way. I stared out the window and he didn't press me. That's what I'd always liked about Rudy. He never forced closeness. He made room for it. His apartment was small. Really small. It was one of those older buildings with creaky floors and windows that rattled when the wind blew. But it smelled like cinnamon and clean laundry, and for the first time in days I felt something close to safe. I offered to sleep on the floor. Said I could just crash for one night too max. He didn't even respond to that, just handed me a pair of soft pajamas and said, "You're taking the bed. I've got the couch." I didn't argue. I didn't have it in me. That night I curled up under a worn quilt that smelled like him and let the warmth settle into my bones. For the first time since the diagnosis I slept. The next morning I woke up to the sound of eggs cracking in the kitchen. I hadn't heard that sound in a long time. At home, breakfast meant a granola bar and a reminder not to make the counters messy. Rudy handed me a plate without asking if I was hungry. I hadn't realized how starving I was until I started eating. When I was halfway through he finally asked, "Are you ready to tell me what happened?" I froze. I hadn't planned how to say it. It all still felt unreal, like I'd made it up. I swallowed, put my fork down and told him everything. About the doctor's appointment, about the diagnosis, about how my parents sat me down and said word for word, "We can't afford both." About how they wanted to leave it in God's hands. His face didn't change as I spoke, but I could see the way his grip tightened around his mug, how his shoulders went stiff and sharp. I told him about the research I did that night, how I googled whether I'd get free treatment if I was a ward of the state, how I thought about getting arrested just to qualify for care, and how when none of that felt right I packed a bag and left. When I finished he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You're not going back there." It wasn't a question. I looked at him unsure. "But, your apartment, there's barely room. I know you don't have." He cut me off. "Don't worry about what I don't have. Worry about staying alive. We'll figure the rest out." I didn't cry, but something cracked in me that morning. Something I didn't know I'd been holding up all this time. Because he didn't say, "Let's think about it." He didn't say, "I'll call them." He didn't say, "Let me see what I can do." He said, "You're not going back." Like it was already decided. Like he'd known it from the moment he picked up the phone. That afternoon he started making calls. He got a list of doctors, clinics, specialists. He asked about payment plans. Told them the situation straight. He's 15. His parents aren't paying. I'll cover what I can. When one place quoted a number that made me feel sick, he didn't flinch. He just nodded and said, "Okay. Thank you." Then he started making other calls. I overheard him talking to a friend, asking if they knew anyone who might want to sublet a room or split an apartment or even buy a small condo. The next day I watched him take a folder out of a drawer and flip through paperwork, deeds, retirement accounts, bonds. He sat with a calculator silent making lists. I tried to stop him. "Rudy, you don't have to do this," I said. "This isn't your responsibility." He looked up at me. "Your family, my parents, are nothing to me anymore," he finished. His voice was calm, steady. "You are. That's all that matters." By the end of the week he put his condo on the market. It was a tiny place, but it was his. Paid off. Cozy. Full of books and memories and chipped mugs he refused to throw away. And he was selling it for me. He never made a big speech. Never said, "Look what I'm giving up." Never cried or asked for anything in return. Just said, "The sooner we get you treatment, the better." That's when I broke. I didn't sob. It wasn't messy. I just sat on the couch and let a single tear slide down my cheek and said, "I didn't think anyone would do this for me." He came and sat beside me. Didn't say anything. Just took my hand. That night, I lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about how differently things could have gone. If I'd stayed home. If I'd waited. If I hadn't called him. I thought about what my parents would say if they knew where I was. What they'd do if they realized someone else had stepped in where they wouldn't. And I thought for the first time about how much power they'd given up when they made their choice. They'd written me off. But I was still here. And thanks to Rudy I was going to stay here. Alive. Healing. Watching. They didn't know it yet, but their decision was going to come back to them. Soon I would do something that would change everything. The first few weeks after my treatment ended were the hardest. People think recovery is this glorious upward climb, like the worst is over and everything just gets better. But it's not. It's messy and slow. It's full of side effects and strange pain and long stretches of feeling stuck between getting better and still being broken. Rudy didn't rush me. He cooked, cleaned, handled the bills, sat with me in silence when I didn't feel like talking, and listened without interruption when I did. He treated my healing like it was the most important project in the world. And somehow little by little I came back. My body stopped shaking when I stood too long. I could keep food down. I started walking further each day, talking more, sleeping more than an hour at a time. I still had nothing to give him. Not then. But I promised myself that when the time came he would never want for anything again. And even as I worked on getting stronger, I felt something else building inside me. Not anger. Not hate. Just this cold, steady knowledge that I couldn't let what they did disappear into silence. They tried to erase me. They'd written me off like a bad investment. And yet I was still here. Breathing. Healing. Watching. So I started thinking about how to make it matter. I didn't want a viral post or a screaming match or some long-winded letter about how much they'd hurt me. What I wanted was for the right person to know. The one person whose opinion they worshipped. Growing up, there were always certain rules in our house. Things that didn't make sense to outsiders. Like how we weren't allowed to eat in the living room on certain nights. Or why my dad would buy expensive wine we weren't allowed to open. It was all about preparing for her. Dr. Mallory Avery. She was the kingmaker. Ran the National Private Admissions Consortium. Former Ivy League dean. Respected. Untouchable. She came to dinner once when I was 11. I wore a suit I hated and was told not to speak unless spoken to. I remember that night down to the smell of the overcooked salmon my dad ruined because he was too nervous to pay attention to the oven. Callie showed her a science project. My parents laughed too loudly at her jokes. They kept slipping in their client stats, their student success stories, their whole pitch wrapped in casual conversation. Me? I was there to smile, nod and stay quiet. After she left, my parents buzzed like they'd just seen God. If we get Avery's trust, we're set, my mom said. That's all it takes. They spent the next decade obsessed with that woman's approval. So when I was finally strong enough to sit at my desk without my legs shaking, I opened a blank email, and I wrote the truth. Not a rant, just facts. I told her who I was, that I had met her once, that I was the son of Victoria and Martin Hart, and that when I was 15 I got sick, and that they had the money to help me, but they decided to save it for my sister's education. I told her I ran away, that my uncle took me in, that he sold his home, his savings, everything he had to keep me alive. I told her that my parents were still out there running a business based on the image of a loving, principled family, one that put children first. I attached proof, a rejection letter from the treatment center listing the exact cost, a text message from my dad telling Callie to ignore me. He'll come back when he's tired of acting out. A screenshot of my mom writing, can't throw it all away on a gamble. And then I ended the message with one line, I thought you should know what kind of people you're working with. I stared at the screen for a long time before hitting send. Not because I was scared. Because I knew the second I pressed that button, things would never be the same again. I didn't tell Rudy. I didn't need him to talk me out of it or worse to try to protect me from what might happen next. He'd already done enough. This part was mine. It was quiet. Private. And when I finally hit send I closed the laptop, took a deep breath and poured myself a glass of water with hands that didn't shake anymore. I didn't know when things would start. I didn't even know if she'd respond. But I knew the one thing that mattered most. I had said exactly what needed to be said to the only person who mattered in their world. I didn't need to scream. I just had to whisper in the right ear. I didn't hear back from Dr. Avery. I didn't expect to. But a few weeks after I sent the message I noticed something strange. The badge on my parents' website, the one from the consortium, was gone. It had always been front and center. They used to brag about it constantly. Endorsed by Avery, they'd say. She only works with the best. Now it was just missing. I checked the consortium's directory. Their name had been quietly removed. No announcement. No drama. Just one clean cut. And then it began. At first it was little things. Their business page, which used to be full of 5-star reviews and glowing testimonials, started losing traction. A few reviews disappeared entirely. One school they were closely partnered with dropped them from a speaking panel without explanation. They posted less. Their smiles looked tighter. Then the real damage started. Rumors in parent groups. Posts hinting at unethical practices. One client pulled their contract and requested a full refund. They tried to pivot. New branding, new packages, even a name change. It didn't work. Their phones stopped ringing. Their inbox went silent. Clients ghosted them. Schools cut ties. Their reputation, once the entire foundation of their business, had collapsed without a sound. 6 months later I heard they had to shut down their office. They moved everything into their home, then lost that too. I found out through a post on a local forum. Someone asking if anyone knew a cheap real estate agent because a couple in education consulting just defaulted. The address matched. They moved into a rental in a worse part of town. Still together but barely. Not out of love. Out of necessity. I heard they fought constantly. Neighbors reported shouting. Once the police were called. They didn't split. Maybe they couldn't afford to. Maybe they knew no one else would want them. And through all of it I stayed silent. I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out. I just watched. And I built. By the time I was 19, I had turned my tutoring side hustle into a full-time business. I specialized in helping kids with college essays, especially the ones who didn't have picture-perfect lives. I understood how to make their stories real, how to make them count. Word spread. Clients poured in. I brought Rudy on full-time. Admin, scheduling, managing emails. I paid him more than he'd ever made in his life. He never asked for a raise. Never asked for anything actually. But I gave it to him anyway. Because he gave up everything for me. On his birthday I surprised him with a house. Small sunlit near a lake with a reading room and a kitchen that didn't leak. He cried. Then I cried. Then I booked him a trip to Greece. He'd always wanted to go. Said he used to have a photo of Santorini taped above his desk. He posted a picture from the trip. Him smiling holding a glass of wine, the sea behind him. Caption said, "To my wonderful nephew Elliot, thank you for giving me a life I never dared to dream of." That was the post that changed everything, made its way back to them. I don't know how, maybe someone shared it, maybe they searched my name out of habit or spite. But I know the moment they saw it. Because just days later they started reaching out. The first it was emails. "We're happy you're doing well. Let's reconnect. We'd love to talk." I didn't respond. Then came the text. The calls. I changed my number. Then one day I saw them. They came to an event I was speaking at. Some small conference for student mentors. They waited outside until it ended. I walked out and there they were. I almost didn't recognize them. My mom looked older, her suit didn't fit right, her shoes were worn down. My dad had gray streaks in his hair, his makeup uneven like he hadn't worn it in a while. "Elliot," he said. His voice cracked. "Please. Just a minute." I didn't move. "We know we messed up," my mom said. "We've lost everything." My dad stepped forward. "We saw Rudy's post. We didn't realize how far you'd come. How generous you are." I stared at him. "You mean generous like paying for someone's treatment so they don't die?" I asked. He flinched. My mom spoke again. "We were scared. We made mistakes. We didn't think." "No," I said. "You didn't think? You just decided I wasn't worth it." "We were under pressure," my dad whispered. "We thought Callie's not talking to you either," I said. "Because even she knows what you did." They were quiet then. "Tired. We're not asking for much," my mom said. "Just a little help. We're not doing well." I let the silence hang. And then I said, "You told me you couldn't afford to save my life. I'm just returning the favor." My dad's lip trembled. My mom looked away. And I turned around and walked off the curb toward my car. They didn't follow. Later that night Rudy asked me how the talk went. I told him it was fine. I didn't mention them. He smiled, poured us both some tea and started planning his next trip. I asked where he wanted to go. He grinned. "Somewhere warm. With a hammock." We clinked mugs. And I thought, not for the first time. I didn't just survive. I built something. And I built it for the only person who ever thought I was worth saving.